Tractate Sanhedrin, page 46. Today we're going to study with a lot of practical halachot. We're going to deal a lot with the subject of afterlife, mainly burial and its consequences. Here are some examples of our discussion that connected to our lives. In Belgium, it's one of the common law over certain cemeteries that the government or the organizations can open the graves and move the deceased from one location to another, or in some cases even cremates. Is that permissible and why? Another subject we're going to talk is upon death, as those who are experts understand, as we discussed in the past, there is a process of the body decay. The first stage, in many situations, the body is very hot, and over the time they take it to a special process in the freezing, and then the body is more kind of a regular size and able to, in United States, for example, you put it in a coffin. In other countries, you put the shroud around it. But the whole subject of burying while the body is still hot, it is a subject that discussed in Halakha. There is one of the well-known poskim in the past generation, Maharsham, dealing with that. We're going to discuss also the more philosophical, mystical reason for death. Try to understand why and what. A good example to that is the Al-Shich HaKadosh, one of the great rabbis that gave a eulogy to the Arizal, great Kabbalist of the 16th century. And he tried to say that obviously he died so young, at his early 30s, and he said that it's kind of free of sin, and he says the vetalita oto al etz, that when you have no idea why someone passed away, you can attribute that to the etz hadat, the eating from the tree of knowledge at the time of Adam and Eve. So we're going to explain that as well. Time is allowed, we're going to discuss the story of King Saul. King Saul, when he was in crisis, he went to some type of, I don't know if it's the right word, but psychic, who at that time the woman was able to bring the soul of Samuel, and he asked a question. Obviously things like that is not permissible, but how come a great man like King Saul did it? There is a special interpretation in conjunction to our daf today, but one of the first and foremost idea is halanat hamet. In Jewish law, we need to bury as soon as possible. The whole idea of comforting the dead and doing things around the deceased before its burial is not in the spirit of Jewish law. Jewish law requires first and foremost to bury and then to go to a process of giving comfort and condolences. So let's start with the Mishnah. As you see, there's a lot to cover. And Mishnah, it's on page 45b, 10 lines from the bottom of the page. Here's the text from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, verse 22. Again, biblical terms. Someone get a capital punishment, and the Torah commanded us to hang the person, but then they said, Lo talin limrato al ha'etz, we are prohibited to keep the body hanging, we have to bury. Kol haniskalin nitlim divrei Rabbi Eliezer, meaning all those people who have this verdict of capital punishment by stoning, they hung after the death. The sages said, not everyone, only the corpse that of the blasphemer, who is, of course, the Almighty God, and the corpse of idol worshipper are hung. And that's the way the Rambam in Great Sanhedrin, chapter 15, said, after the blasphemer and the idol worshipper have been stoned, the corpses was also hung. That's basically the Rambam. Now, the Gemara later on explain in details what's the real difference between the sages and Rabbi Eliezer. The Ramban Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, on that pasuk in the Torah, tried to explain that the idea of dibur al avodah zarah, the expression of word, the utterances on idol worshipping, created goremet klala ba'olam, created a spirit of curses. But anyway, so how you do it? Ha'ish tolin panav klape ha'am, והאישה פניה כלפי העץ, דברי רבי אליעזר. So when it's come to a male and female, we treat it differently when it's fulfilling this mitzvah. The corpse of man is hung facing the people, but the corpse of women, out of modesty, is hung with facing the tree. There is a lot of commentators that dealing, the Yad Ramah and others, the whole idea why and what exactly happened when it's the if women involved with the hanging or not involving hanging. We're going to study it in the next page. Anyway, that's the word of Rabbi Eliezer. The sages said that no, when it's come to this, only men can have it, not women. אמר להם רבי אליעזר, ולא שמעון בן שטח עלה נשים באשקלון. This is a story that we learned several times. Shimon ben Shetach was the head of the Sanhedrin at that time, and some said he was a president, some said it was of the rabbinic court. That's Gemara in Tractate Chagiga, page 16b. So here we talk about 80 women that was involved with witchcraft and psychic and things like that in the southern Israel, in the city of Ashkelon. And Shimon ben Shetach judged them, followed the book of Exodus chapter 22. He judged them for capital punishment, and we discussed it in the previous daf. The question is how he did it and what he did, but anyway, so אמרו לו 80 נשים תלה, אין דנים שניים ביום אחד. So they said, okay, later we learned that it was exception, but he did it with 80 women, but the halakha is the same court may not judge even two people charged with the capital transgressions on the same day. So what you see here is either Rashi said that he did it in one day, so they'll not save all the other mechashefot, or themselves, the Yad Ramah said. But anyway, he wanted, the Rashi and the Mefarshim said, to promulgate that so people be totally aware of that. But what we derive from that is that it was not acting following the Torah law, but rather his execution of the 80 women was an extraordinary punishment necessitated by unusually pressing circumstances. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages teach us, Vehumat vetalita. The Torah said over there in the Devarim 21 that when it's come to men committed a sin worthy of death, and put him to death, and then you shall hang him on a tree. So they said, Yachol kol hamumatim nitlim. It may interpret that all those people, all those who put in death are hung. So it said, Talmud lomar ki kerelat Elohim talui. This text said that for he was hung in a curse of the Almighty. You derive for that, מה מקלל זה שבסקילה, אף כל שבסקילה, דברי רבי אליעזר, ואחרים אומרים, מה מקלל זה שכפר בעיקר, אף כל שכפר בעיקר. So we go by the view of the same way as the stoning. So, but those who are liable to be executed in other ways are not hung after the death. That's Rabbi Eliezer. The sages said, the same way as this blasphemer, that he basically denies the principle of believing the Almighty God, is hung after his death. So the same way you do with all the others who are heretics or deny the existence of the Almighty. What is the real difference between all these views? So he said here is one of the 13 principles of Rabbi Ishmael that we said every day. Rabbanan darshei klalei ufratei, Rabbi Eliezer darish ribuyei umiutei. The sages derived the generalization and details, one of the methods of which the Torah interpreted, versus Rabbi Eliezer, interpreted the amplifications and restrictions, a different approach to the Torah exegesis. So, Rabbanan Darshe Klalei Upratei, the sages expound of generalization and details. So, Vehumat Vetalita Klal, when the Torah used the term, the person should put to death and he should hang him, that's a very generalization, and there's no particular offense specified in this. And then Ki Kelelat Prat, then they use the word in a very specific, for that was hang is a curse of the Almighty, is in detail, a specific transgression we mentioned in the text. I havu mekar vela'adadei amrinan ein baklal lamash beprat. Hane'in min yachida lo. If those psukim, so Rabbanan Darshe Klalei Upratei v'omad v'te'adaklet klal prat. Okay, so he said if these two leshonot, if the two principles were written next to one another, the same pasuk, they reply that the principle of generalization and details, and said that the generation includes only that which is stated in the details. So therefore, you said, this transgressor, the blasphemer, yes, his corpse is subject of being hung after he is executed, but the corpse of anyone else is not. Page 46, Hashtad dimirachakei mehadadei, since you have this situation that the generalization and the details are distant from each other, which means that they are written in different psukim, so therefore, ahanei lerabuyei avodah zara deredamei lei bechol milei. So basically the psukim serve to include one who is found guilty of idol worship, and he is similar to the blasphemer in all matters. He too is subject to being hung after he is executed. ורבי אליעזר דריש ריבויי ומעוטי ואומת ותלית הריבוי ככללת מיעוט. יאבו מקרבי לעדדי לא אבי מרבינן אל עבודה זרה, דדם אלה בכל מילי, השתא דמרחקין מעדדי הנשאר לריבוי שאר הנסכלים. So he basically said that because you have now the distance from each other, the psukim serve to include all those who are liable to be stoned, and all of their corpses hung after they put to death. So now, just a side of the Al-Shich HaKadosh. Al-Shich HaKadosh said, when he gave a hesped, when he gave a eulogy to the great Mareno Arizal, the great Kabbalist of the 16th century, he said, the Pasuk said, V'chi yeh be'ish chet. So when it's a person have a chet, meaning chet is like a sin. So he said, if the person have a chisaron, some deficiencies. So they said, what's the chisaron? Lakhu mimeno et haneshama, they take away the soul from him. He's no longer among the living. So he said, Harizal, the great man of the earth, that he was absolutely free of sins. How do you explain? So he said, Vetalita oto al etz. So therefore you figuratively explain the Arizal death in such a young age by the original biblical story, which is the story of Adam and Eve, that God basically instituted the death in the world upon that decision to limited the life of a person to 120 years. Ha'ish tolin vechulei. So this is the Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer said that the mitzvah applies to women as well as men. The sages said no, it's only male and not female. So they ask a question, Maita Amad Rabbanan. What's the reason why the sages say that the mitzvah of hanging is not applied to women? Amar Kra, the Torah said in Deuteronomy 21, Vetalita oto, oto velo ota. The Torah said you shall hang him, so he should be hanged, but not her. Rabbi Eliezer oto belo chsuto. Rabbi Eliezer said that women are also equally in a sense of being hung, but it derived from the word him, meaning oto, which is him by himself without his clothing. So that he is the relative. Tosfot explained it's derivative because in the other place on previous page 44, we explained that they should cover his body when they hung him. So therefore you need to bring another pasuk to say that you should do it while he's naked to hang him. But anyway, ורבנן אין הכי נמי אלא אמר קרא וחיה באיש חטא איש ולא אישה. So because the Torah used the male, so if a man has committed the sin, so that's applied to male. ורבי אליעזר, היי וחיה באיש מיידריש לי, אמר ריש לקיש, ההוא למהותי בן סורר ומורה, שעל שום סופו נהרג, אבל מיעוט אחר מיעוט ומיעוט אחר מיעוט על לרבות. So the story of Ben Sorer Moreh, which we explained many times, is not something that happened, it's just hypothetical case, but from the Ben Sorer Moreh we derive all these ideas, all these concepts. אמר להן רבי אליעזר, והתניא בן סורר ומורה, נסכל ונתלה דבר רבי אליעזר. We learn about the stubborn and rebellious son. That's the case, as we said, hypothetical case in the Torah. So he said that he was stoned and afterward his corpse is hung. אלא אמר רב נחמן בר יצחק לרבות בן סורר ומורה. מהי טעמה? דאמר קרא וחיה באיש חטא. איש ולא בן. Person, not son. חטא, מי שעל חטאו נהרג. One is the execution is for his account of his sin. יצא בן סורר ומורה שעל שום סופו נהרג. The stubborn and rebellious sons is executed not because of his sin that he is already committed, but an account that he is likely to do in the future. הווה מיעוט אחר מיעוט ואין מיעוט אחר מיעוט על לרבות. You have here a restrictive expression after a restrictive expression, and there is only to amplify the halacha that include additional cases. So it serves to teach that the corpse of a stubborn and rebellious son is hung after he is put to death. אמר להן רבי אליעזר, והלא שמעון בן שטח תלה נשים, that's what we learn in the Mishnah. So he said, אמר רב חיסדא לא שנו לה בשתי מיתות, אמרנו מיתה אחת דנים. That's solely applied that it's two different execution. For example, one is a stoning, one is a strangulation. But if the judge in the same case, the capital punishment, so the rabbinic court can go and do the verdict of both of them the same day, because you don't have the concern that there's not enough time for the court to examine properly. Anyway, so they said, והאש מעשה לשמעון בן שטח דמיתה אחת הווי וקרמו לידיהן דנים. So here you have the case of Shimon ben Shetach that involve only in one mode of execution, because all the women were accused of witchcraft, and yet this rabbi said to him that the court may not judge them on one single day. All of that applies when you have one execution the same as two. כגון שתי עבירות, אבל במיתה אחת ועבירה אחת דנים. But if it's one death of the execution, only one transgression, the court may in fact judge two cases in one day. מטיב רבה לברבה, אין דנים שניים ביום אחד ואפילו בנואף ונואפת, even if it's a situation of idolater and idolatress. So it means that the rabbinic court may not judge two cases on one day, even if the two cases involve only one mode of execution and the same transgression. תרגמה רב חיסדא בבת כהן ובעולה. Rab Chisda interprets that the daughter of a Kohen and the man whom she engaged in intercourse, so that basically the daughter of the Kohen, for a Kohen is liable to receive death by burning, while the man is liable to receive death by stoning if the woman was betrothed to another man, or strangulation if it was married to another man. So basically we just go by the original text of the Torah, the way we interpret it. Obviously, we not talk practical in that sense, but gets the mindset. Or bebat Kohen וזוממי זוממיה, or daughter of Kohen, when they have conspiring witnesses, the witnesses who render as conspiring witnesses, the witnesses who testified about her. תניא רבי אליעזר בן יעקב אומר, שמעתי שבית דין מקין ועונשין. I heard that the beit din can go ahead and administer lashes and capital punishment even when not required by Torah law. שלא מן התורה, ולא לעבור על דברי תורה, אלא כדי לעשות סייג לתורה. It is not to violate Torah law, but to violating the statement of Torah, which means to disgrace the punishment stated in the Torah. But the whole idea is that the punishment erect a fence around the Torah, so that people will fear committing sins. The Netziv of Volozhin asked a question about King Saul. How come King Saul consulted with those witchcrafts? And he tried to say a big ma'alach, that it was a pikuach nefesh, it was a saving of life. But you see in the book Nachalat Shiv'ah, you see also in the book by Maharshal, a similar question like that. Like, for example, in those days it was Arab witchcraft. It was a fellow that was, there's a lot of issue in Chevra Kadisha and his employment and his relationship to others. And they ask if they're allowed to take a non-Jewish Arab, like a witchcraft, try to heal him from that, from all those spiritual problems. That's question posted to Rabbi Shmuel Salant. Anyway, ומעשה באחד שרכב על סוס בשבת בימי יוונים. So here is a story about someone who ride a horse on Shabbat, the time of the Greek, והביאו לבית דין ושקלו לא מפני שראו לכך, because he violated only rabbinic commandment, אלא שהשעה צריכה לכך. So it was not because that's because the hour required, as people had become lax in the observance of Shabbat, and therefore it became necessary to impose the severe punishment for relatively minor offenses. So there is a question halacha, derivative, we talk about Shabbat, using a bicycle in a place that there is a eruv. It's a discussion halacha based on this sugya. Anyway, שוב מעשה באדם אחד שהטיח את אשתו תחת התאנה. So here is another case that a person who engaged in intercourse with his wife in public under a fig tree. So the point is, you think that it's not a problem because it's a husband and wife, but they did it in public. So והביאו אותו לבית דין, הביאו לבית דין והלקוהו. So they brought him to court and they gave him lashes. Why is that? They flagged him. לא מפני שראו לכך אלא שהשעה צריכה לכך. It's not because that punishment was fitting for him, because such conduct is not forbidden by the Torah, it's my husband and wife, but because the hour required it, which is people had become remiss the matter of modesty, and therefore stringent measures had to be taken to rectify the situation. Some said Norat Amar said it just by the Maaseh Pritzut, just by the act, but others have a different view why it happens. I want to comment another thing on that, which is the idea of Asir Siag LaTorah. So if you read the story of Tamar in Bereshit 38, verse 24, so Yehuda said, Otziuha v'tisaref, take her out and she should be burned. So Rashi said, v'tisaref, she should burn, daughter of Shem, that he was a Kohen, so therefore that's the Ramban asked, if it's the daughter of Kohen, she doesn't deserve a burning, but meaning Arusa, if she is betrothed, but not a single one. And here the only thing she needs is someone to have Zikat Yebum that can redeem her soul, because the husband passed away with no children. So the Taz, Divrei David, explain this question of the Ramban. He says, based on our sugya, that the Bet Din Makin Ronshin Shelo Min HaTorah, and basically they do that, ולא לעבור על דברי תורה, is not because they wanted to violate the Torah law, אלא כדי לעשות סייג לתורה, to put a boundary around the Torah. So here the same applies here. לפיכך דנוע בשריפה. It's just הוראת שעה. Anyway, here we go to the Mishnah. כיצד תולין אותו? How exactly do they hang the corpse of one who was put to death by stoning? משקיעין את הקורה בארץ, והעץ יוצא ומקיף את שני ידיו זו על זו ותולה אותו. So here's the graphic description how to do it. You read in your Gemarrah the interpretation of the Mishnah. רבי יוסי אומר, הקורה מוטה על הכותל ותולה אותו כדרך שהטבחין עושים. Just reading it first, it's a very graphic, and I assume that people just can read it. ומתירין אותו מיד, ואם לאן עובר עליו בלא תעשה, שנאמר לו תלין תלתו על העץ, כי קבור תגברנו, כי אלת אלוהים תלוי. Now here is a fascinating here, you know that I'm very strict with the word כלומר. Here they use it. כלומר, מפני מה זה תלוי, מפני שברך השם נמצא שם שמיים מתחלל. It's not the time to explain, but obviously there is a lot to say. אמר רב מאיר, בשעה שאדם מצטער, שכינה אמר, לשון אומרת, כלני מראשי, כלני מזרועי. When a person suffer in the wake of his sin, what expression that the divine presence use, I am distressed about my head, I am distressed about my arm, meaning I too in a way suffer when the wicked are punished. So, and they said, אם כן המקום מצטער על דמם של רשעים שנשפך, קל וחומר על דמם של צדיקים. So in our language, the gods feel sorry, not only for the wicked, not only for the righteous, but the wicked as well. If you talk about wicked, how much so the righteous. So Rabbeinu פינחס Mikoritz, in a book called Imrei Pinchas, brings that Reb Zusha Me'alimpoli said, my great uncle said, he brings that, just like to read it from the book, it's called Torat HaAdam. ריבונו של עולם, בוודאי ישראל הם העיקרים וטובים. Obviously, the Almighty God, the nation of Israel are good people. שאם לא תאמר כן חס וחלילה, פסלו בתפילין שלך, שלא בתפילין דמראה על מכתיב ומי כמך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ. So he said that that's the meaning of the Mishnah said, that when the person sorry, the Shekhinah said, כלני מראשי, כלני מזרועי, that כביכול, תפילין of קודש לבריך הוא נפסלין, which means the head, the arm, the place that putting tefillin, the marsha imply also. Anyway, there's a Tiferet Israel on this, and there's many more mefarshim. What does that mean? Kaleli miroshi, kaleli mizroi. It's like there is a big segula. The person should say Elakad Rab Meir Aneni several times. So he said that's what they mean. You see it also in Pardet Yosef that he said, regardless you call sons Aneni, Elakad Meir, when I have the sorrow, so the Shekhinah cried out and said, Aneni, you should not need to say Kaleni Miroshi, Kaleni Mizroi, and therefore you reward that the Almighty accept our supplications. Anyway, ולא זה בלבד, אלא כל המלין את מתו עובר בלא תעשה. And furthermore, anyone, and that's important for people to realize, that anyone who's take the deceased body of his relative overnight without burying him transgresses a prohibition. And he said, but if he did it in his honor, which means he need to bring a coffin or shroud for his burial, so that's different. He's not in a violation of not burying immediately, because the prohibition against leaving him unburied overnight. And they not bury him in his ancestral burial place. In those days it was a cave with ancestral burial place. It was two cemeteries, two grave sites, basically, they were established for the burial for those who were executed by the rabbinic court. So basically we divided the 4 mitot bedin, and you combine Neragim נחנקים in one side, נזכלים ונשרפים the other. נתעכל הבשר, מלקטים את העצמות וקוברים אותו במקומם. So the moment that the flesh of the deceased had decomposed, they shall gather his bones and bury them in the proper place in the ancestral burial plot. So they said, והקרובים באים שואלים בשלום הדיינים ובשלום העדים. People come and inquire about the welfare of the judges and the welfare of the witnesses. Again, כלומר, we don't have time for this, but maybe another time, שאין בליבנו עליכם שדין אמת דנתם, that we hold no grudges against you as you judge a true judgment. 46b, ולא היו מתאבלים, אבל עוננין שאין עוננות אלא בלב. Here's the few concepts I would like to elaborate. First and foremost is the Rambam. The Rambam tells us in Great Sanhedrin chapter 13, the relatives of one who was executed by the rabbinic court may not observe the rites of mourning, but they may grieve over his passing, since grief is felt only in the heart, which is a kind of hard concept. I'd like just to give you some short point over that. First and foremost is the Gesher HaChaim, is the book written by Rabbi Tukuchinsky, dealing with the bridge of life, meaning the end of life issues, and is an excellent book. I think in the recent years it's also translated to English, but he dealt with this type of idea of mourning, the concept of mourning. Here and the next daf, obviously we're going to elaborate the idea of kapara, of atonements. Simply speaking, there is an notion in Judaism that a person who's no longer among the living, that act by itself is atone for his sins. Here the big question, derivative from Rashi and others, and the way that we read the Rambam, is the idea of acting in a manner of mourning is a kind of in honor for the deceased. If you tell me that that's an honor, if you have a harugei beidin, those people who executed for their sin by the court, did they need to have this type of honor, or the other way around? If they need to reach a point of denigration or insult in our language in order for them to have an atonement for their sins. Either it's the idea that a person who's very wicked or even evil, that he reach a point that he or she has been executed, we may need to go by the derivative of King Solomon in the book of Proverbs, who said in Mishlei Yud Aleph in the Proverbs chapter 11, Ba'avod reshaim rina, when the wicked are no longer among the living, that's a reason to be glad. And here in the Jewish thought, in philosophy, we differentiate between a person who's wicked lete'avon, which is he does this out of his just desire, not because he wants to do a act of rebellious purposely against God's commandments, versus people who's lehachis, who do that davka on purpose to fight or disobey against God's law in the Torah. So therefore there is a written in the book in Jewish thought. You see it, for example, in the Rabbeinu Asher on the Tractate Moed Katan chapter 3. You see it also in the Rambam in Perusha Mishnayot. It's called Tza'ara de Kivra, which means that if they denigrated the body, so it's kind of way that the body get punished. But again, in a general concept, is when we said here that the relative of the executed man will not mourn with the observance of usual mourning rites, so that the unmourned death will atone for his transgression. You have a lot of derivative. Do you need to mourn over someone who committed suicide, since we do not bury a person who committed suicide the same place in the cemetery as everyone else. We need to create a fence, and he or she needs to be buried out of the fence. And as you know, by the law of cemeteries, which are many, I have the privilege to serve community for about 22 years, 3 communities, and the question of the cemetery came up a lot. One of the issues is the erecting fences for those who violated Jewish law in such a level that they took the life away. So therefore, there are many derivatives here when there's the bet din that executed a person, how the relatives, the family need to the act in a sense of mourning. We're not going there too much. I only recommended several books. Rabbi Lam for Yeshiva University wrote an excellent book, The Mourning. The late Rabbi College wrote an excellent book also, The Jewish Mourners Book of Why. You see a lot of write-up over this, but in general, he would differentiate between a regular act of mourning and aninut. And onen is basically the mourner who is in a period between the passing of the loved ones, one of the 7 relatives, and the burial. So here the Mishnah elaborated and said that onenim, the one who's literally, it's you can say people who are in a period in between, but you can say the grieving person. So they obviously, it's in the heart of a person, since grief is felt only in the heart. So you can say mourning that appear in the eye of people, that's in a way an honor for the deceased and delay the atone for the person's sins. Versus, that's the mindset of Rashi. Other things that is in the heart of people, so that's you see the Meiri, you see others in Masechet Smachot chapter 2 that we differentiate between the way it appears in the external appearance to other people, the way that we feel in the hearts of hearts. But again, what is the derivative, the Adrama said, we differentiate between feeling of hearts versus something that is commended. People who are executed by the court for their terrible sin, that they reached that level that they need to be executed, therefore on the surface at least, or the appearance, there is no act of mourning. You see a good example, the Mishnah in Tractate Zrachim, chapter 15, the second Mishnah, that speaks about Kohen rights to walk in the holy Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. So they said that this type of things is prohibited, and if he did it, so it's invalid. It's not a good. It's not the way that they follow the spirit and the rights of Jewish law. Tanu Rabbanan. So since we talk about the mitzvah of tliya, as we explained earlier, is a process. First is the skila, and then the tliya, the hanging. Tanu Rabbanan, based on the book of Dvarim, chapter 21. So the Torah said, if a person deserves such an executed, so we hang him on a tree, and we explained that that's involved the prohibition against delay funerals in our days, which is, if a person is passed away, we have to bury as soon as we can, not delayed more than absolute basic needs. So, ilu nemar chet vetalita, if the Torah said, just in the Hebrew wording, they said, if a man has committed a sin worthy of death, shall you hang him on a tree? So הייתי אומר, תולים אותו ואחר כך ממיתים אותו כרך שהמלכות עשה. So we said that the way that the non-Jewish government used to do in those days, they're hanging and then they put him to death. תלמוד לומר, והוא מת ותלית, ממיתים אותו ואחר כך תולים אותו. The Torah said, no, it has to be the reverse order, which is first you create the skila, the stoning, and then you hang. And they said, הכיצד? משין אותו עד סמוך לשקיעת החמה וגומרים את דינו. So delayed the verdict until the near very time close to sunset. And as we learned many times, at the moment the sun sets, we cannot delay the deceased without burial. So in that sense, we have a consideration even at that time to do it kind of the least pain and the least delay that we can. וגומרים בדינו, ממיתים אותו, ואחר כך תולים אותו, ואחד קושר ואחד מתיר כדי לקיים מצוות תלייה. So this is the whole process, again, running out of time, but you can read the Mefarshim, the commentators, especially those who have Gemarot Mefarshim, all the variation. תנו רבנן, עץ שומע אני בין בתלוש בין מחובר, תלמוד לומר כי קבור, מי שאינו מחוסר לקבורה, יצא זה שמחוסר כצה גבורה. Here's the discussion about the tree. You talk about detach or not detach, how you do it, and that's they explain. ורבי יוסי אומר, מי שאינו מחוסר אל הקבורה, יצא זה שמחוסר תלישה ובקבורה, ורבנן תלישה עליו כלומו. So, again, the disputation is if the detaching the tree is a significant, or according to the sages, is insignificant act. So the Mishnah said klomar, and again, we don't have a time to deal with that, but obviously there is a reason for that. So they said klomar, מפני מה זה תלוי? מפני שביירח. So because he bless God is a euphemism, it's saying that he did the blasphemy. תניא אמר רבי מאיר, משלו משל למעלה ועד אומר, שני אחים תומים בעיר אחת. They bring a allegory for the two brothers, that the twin brother, that they live in one city. אחד מינו מלך ואחד יצא לליסטיות. One brother became a king and the other brother become some type of thief, we can call it banditry. ציווה המלך ותלאו, so the government, the king commanded to hang him. כל הרעות אומר המלך תלוי, ציווה המלך והורידו, so everyone said the king was hanged. So the king therefore commanded that his brother be taken down, and they took the bandits down. Similarly, people are created in God's image, and therefore God in a way is disgraced when the corpse is hung for a transgression that the person has committed. אמר רבי מאיר, מאי וכולי, מה כמשמע? מאי משמע? אמר רבי, כמאן דאמר קל לית. אמר לרבא, אם כן כבד עלי ראשי, כבד עלי זרועי מבעלי, אלא אמר רבא, כמאן דאמר קיל לי על מה. So it's like, so it means that like a person say, I'm light, and therefore the world is heavy for me, and I'm in distress. So the Gemara said, "Hai mibayla legufa." Im ken neima mekalel mai kilelat ve'makulea leachi udeata. So they said, "Im ken neima kra kilat mai kilelat." Why use this extra letter? So they said, "Shma minat tarte." You learn both. So the blasphemer is hung after he was stoned, and they conclude that God is distressed at the death of someone who committed a sin. Then the Mishnah said, "Velo zo bilvad." Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So here we talk about halanat hamet, which is the delay of burial of the deceased. So the Mishnah teaches us that it's not only someone who hung by the court that we cannot delay or cannot hold the burial with from immediate act, but it also applies to every single deceased. אמר רבי יוחנן משום רבי שמעון בן יוחאי, מניין למילין את מיתו שעובר עליו בלא תעשה. This is very important. It says from where it is derived that one who leaves his deceased relative overnight without burying him transgress a prohibition, and that's unfortunately something that I find over the years in this country a very painful subject. Yes, there are exceptions, which is an immediate family that needs to come out of state. There are some rabbis in some situations allow delayed burial. Over here they require state law with a burial instructions, a special cement, coffin, licensing, signature of the doctors and more. So all the process of burial has to be more in a sense of formality, which take time. Yet we should understand, I'm using that just as an example, in the state of Israel, one of my closest friends, when I live in Har Nof in Yerushalayim, Menachem Walder. So it happens, unfortunately, on Shabbat afternoon, his little daughter died in the crib. So I remember right after the Havdalah, maybe an hour later, she was already buried. So in Israel, basically, we do the tahara and we wrap the body and then we bury as soon as possible, follow this important notion in the Torah. But here, the Gemara said, how about someone who delayed the burial of his relatives, that he's in a violation of the negative commandment in the Torah? So he brings the source. The Torah said, Lo tali nivlato ki kavor tikberenu. The Torah said clearly in the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23, but you shall bury him, and the doubling the verb for emphasis. Ki kavor tikberenu, meaning you shall bury, in a sense, repeat twice. So it means that we shall, that it's a clearly commandment. מכאן למלים את תלמיתו שעובר על לא תעשה. From here we have a clear derivative that Torah instructed us that one should not leave his deceased relative overnight, and if he did it, he basically transgressed a prohibition. There is in a Sefer HaChinuch Taf Kuf Lamed Zayin, it's one of the mitzvot that he explained, that's applied to all different variation of corpse. We have to bury as soon as we can. As we said earlier, Rabbi Tukochinsky in his book go more in a mystical sense that it's caused a tremendous sorrow. I tried to say to people several times until I'm about to give up on this. People feel that the longer the eulogy and the ceremony and the standing line for people to express condolences, it's in honor of the deceased. In the next shiur, in the next daf, we're going to prove the opposite. That basically Rabbi Tukochinsky elaborates on that a lot, that any second, any moment of delay is a sorrow to the deceased. And especially improper eulogy or delaying for not a substantial reason. Ika d'amra amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, remez lekvura min ha-Torah. How you derive some type of hint or kind of the way we alluded from the text. רמז לקבורה מן התורה מנין תלמוד לומר כי קבור תקברנו. The Torah said, as we mentioned earlier in the book of Dvarim 21, but you shall bury him. So here, because we double the verb קבור שורש קוף בית ריש, תקברנו קוף בית ריש. Why need to repeat this twice, the verb? So we derive for that, מכאן רמז לקבורה מן התורה. Here you have a hint. The Torah said that we are obligated to bury min Torah. So here is a big argument. Is that basically a clear statement that one should be buried immediately, or is just a remez, or it's just an implication? It's not a direct mitzvah or isur halana. So on this you see the Ramban on the pasuk and others. You see also in the response called Shelot v'Tshuvot, Chavot Yair. It's one of the prominent responsa in Kuf Lamentet in chapter 139. He asked that question, the whole idea of transgressing by being passive over a burial, and we try to base it on the idea of Harugei Bedin, people who are executed by court. So he had all this malach, because the Torah said ki im is almost like a conditional statement. He tried to say that the aseh and lo ta'aseh, the positive and the negative commandments, are interconnected together, from the notion kol sheyashno be'aseh yeshno gam be'lo ta'aseh. Anyone that applies in a negative notion is also applies to the to positive, applies to negative as well. Now the big question is, what is that? What is the Jewish approach for halanat met lichvodo? For example, you delay the burial because you're waiting for a very prominent speaker, for example, or prominent relatives, etc., to come and to speak on the value of the deceased, is that basically in the honor of the living, those people who listen, or the family, or is in the honor of the deceased? Because if you zoom in the view of Rabbi Shimon here, that he derived from the pasuk, so again, is Yikra de Chayei, is the honor of the deceased family, which is the immediate family, the relatives, the friends, or is for deceased, because the text uses strong language. They use the word Kilelat Elokim Talui, the curse of the Almighty hang, when you have the body hang and you don't bury right away. So in short, the way at least the Chavot Yair hold is Lichvodo Shel Chai. It's a discussion that people ask many times when one say Kaddish, is for the deceased or for the living. And there is a very strong in Jewish thought, you see here in Chavot Yair, you see in others, that is in the honor of the living, which means that is the sort of connectedness, and it's also the effect. It's called in the language of the Talmud, Gadol Kvod Habriyot, Shedoche Lo Taaseh Shebatorah, that's basically the honor of the living, which is the effectiveness, hopefully the way that they follow the good footsteps, and what happened in their hearts as a result of that. That's basically the story. But אמר לשבור מלכה לרב חמה. So here the king of Persia, and you see it in several in Talmud, the king of Persia have dialogue or discussion. You see it, for example, in the Gemara in Bava Metzia, page 119. You see it in Rashi in Shvuot, page 6, and more. You have kind of knowledge and discussion with them. So he said, Kvura min Torah minayin. Prove to me that there is a mitzvah in the Torah, the Persian king said, to bury the deceased. Ishtik, Rav Chama did not respond, he was quiet. So they said, Velo amar le velo midei. So he didn't answer to Shvor Malka, nothing. So they said, Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Imsar alma bidat de tipsha'ei, di bait lememar kikavo. So he said, again, we need to understand it, but in a simple way, he said the world was handed to foolish. He implies that how come Rav Chama did not said, there's a clearly said in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, but should bury the person, bury him. So you derive from that not only harugei bedin, not only people who executed by the court, but also a regular corpse, the obligation to have a burial. That's the Yad Ramah hold. So the Gemara said, Deli avad lei Aaron. So in the case King Shvor could have replied that the pasuk merely proves that the coffin should be made for the deceased, so that it can be a place in it, not that the deceased should be buried in the ground, as the pasuk could be understood as the idea is that you take the corpse and place in some sort of replacement, not in the ground. But in that sense, the Gemara challenged that. They said, Tik berenu. If you go by the pasuk, they said, you shall bury him. That's the double verb. Kavor tik berenu. La mashmale. It does not learn anything from the double verb, which seems to be merely some type of stylistic choice and not the source of the new halacha. So maybe Rav Chama will respond to the Persian king that you see in the Torah, how the Torah describe the burial of righteous people. Take, for example, the Torah describe at length the burial of Sarah by Abraham in Bereshit 25, the burial of Yitzchak and Yaakov, the burial of Rachel and Rivka, Miriam, Aharon, Moshe. So all those examples, it's even people who are total righteous in the biblical images. And Yitzchak bury his father Abraham, Yaakov bury his father Yitzchak, Yosef and his brothers bury Yaakov. So they said min haga be'alma. So you try to say that it's just a custom of the time, not a mitzvah. So they said, if that's the case, midikavrei HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe. But you see, the Torah closes the chapters about the Almighty buried Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, which proves that it's the proper way to handle the dead. So they said, no, the lo ishtanei minaga, again in our language, that the Almighty act in a manner that in order to not to derive from the general custom, but it does not prove that burying the dead is a mitzvah. It was a story in Europe once. A wealthy individual passed away, and the family wanted to ship his body to Israel. Now, obviously, it's involved with tremendous amount of money. This is way before the the modern technology, and the rabbi of the community was the late Rabbi Aharon Kotler, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And he tried to convince the family to bury him in a local cemetery in Europe and ship the money to support people who study Torah in memory of the deceased in Eretz Israel. So they said that they want to ask also another great leader, which is the Lithuanian leader, the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Kagan of Radim. So they went to him and he basically approved that point, which is, he said that in Abraham, when he buried Sarah, he paid to Ephron, to a non-Jewish Hittite, a lot of money, 400 shekel, to get to the cave of Machpelah. So he said that it's also a derivative from that what is really the value for the deceased. The burial is very important, but if one wants to help lift up the soul, it's basically not the act of burial by itself, but also, you see the beautiful write-up my late father used to show me all the times. It's in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abbreviation of Jewish law by the late Rabbi Gansfried. So in chapter 10 he dealt with the law of mourners. So the last paragraph, he said that for the deceased is not just the saying Kaddish and Mishnayot, which is all important, or here the burial, but the act in a manner of which lift up the souls, and that's the core idea of mourning. Anyway, Tashma, וספדו לו כל ישראל וקברו אותו. We learned in a Braita that when it's the Achiyah Ashiloni, the prophet, God told him in regards to Aviyah, the son of Yerovam ben Nevat, that's in the book of Kings, chapter 14, וספדו לו כל ישראל וקברו אותו. So they said that all the nation of Israel eulogized him and buried him. So first, as a side note, one of the great Hasidic rabbis, the Toldot Yaakov Yosef, said that Achiyah Shiloni used to study with the Baal Shem Tov. But anyway, so here the Gemara said, the law, the reason is the law lishtanei minhaga, that not to change from the manner or the custom that the world does. Then we have here the story of the prophet Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah, on chapter 16, verse 4, said, "Lo yisafdu velo yikavru ledomen al pnei adama yihiyu." Anatot was the city that Yirmiyahu lived at that time, and the people of the city was sick and tired to hear a negative prophecy. But the prophet Jeremiah knew that that is right, and they always threatened to kill him, etc., etc. So he reached a point that he basically expressed himself in a very strong language, And he said here, he said that lo yisavdu, they should not be eulogized, nor shall be buried, but they shall be dug upon the face of the earth, which means that is no curse has been pronounced, the dead shall be buried. So they said, Delishtanu min hagar, here is a different story. The Gemara rejected it, because you don't find a clear proof that it is a mitzvah to bury, because Jeremiah cursed the wicked people, and saying that they should not deviate from the general custom and not be buried. So all of those tremendous challenges, tremendous difficulty by being Rav Huna was Rav Chama was unable to adduce the proof that there is a mitzvah to bury the dead. It's important to note, just a conclusion word, we do not have so far a source, we're going to discuss it in the next daf, a source that we have to bury from the Torah. One of the greatest Gedolim in the past generation, Rab Meir Arik, he said that he heard from Rabbi Shlomo Kluger from the city of Brody. It was big disputation among the maskilim, people who object to Torah law, traditional Torah law, in regards to those days they used to carry the body, covered by shrouds obviously, and buried, and they tried to establish a law to use a wagon. It was back and forth, so the non-Jewish judge said, we will continue to use this this notion of using a agala, using a wagon, until I reach the final verdict, which takes time. So Reb Shlomo Kluger said that decision will not make a difference, because no one's going to die in between. A miracle happened, and nobody passed away until the decision was made, which shows in a way the koach HaTorah, the power, tremendous power of the Torah, and that's the Chatam Sofer said that Ephron, when he talked to Abraham, which discussed a lot, so he said, "Tnu li achuzat kever imachem," give me a place to bury my loved one. Abraham said to Ephron, among you. So it's almost like saying, I'm buried for you, which is follow the minhag. So the whole question is, the burial is bizayon, is denigration, or kapara, is atonements, because if you derive the story of Kvuat Sarah, you can argue and say that it is the custom. But as we said, we're going to discuss this in the next daf.